All right, well, Digging Deeper listeners, welcome to the first Digging Deeper of July. Man, we are coming off just a great weekend, 4th of July. A phenomenal, I wish we could just unpack the all-church service that happened on the 3rd. Those were just fantastic things, so good just seeing the unity of our churches. But we're not going to talk about either of those things. We are going to focus today's episode on a spiritual discipline. I have some familiar faces with me. To my left, Nat. Nat, how are you doing today?
Good, yeah. Love the fact that it's raining in July.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't love it.
Oh, but
So,
I do. I looked out last night. It was super weird, 4th of July, and I was like, well, no fires happening tonight.
Yeah,
but, But somebody did let me know there are fires happening in Alaska, so fires can still happen. I looked. There's over 400 fires in Alaska. Unimportant. I digress. To my right, Tawny on the couch. How you doing?
Good.
Doing good. Do you like rain in July?
No, but I like no fires.
Yeah, fair.
Good.
Yeah. And Michael Bond on the couch. How you doing today?
Doing good, Tim.
Awesome. Well, Tawny, right before this recorded, you said, I have a little icebreaker. I didn't want to know what it was. I just wanted it to happen. What do you got for us?
So, do any of you guys play Wordle?
What?
Ooh,
I've heard a little about it.
I have yet.
Okay. Well, hopefully some of our listeners play Wordle because you have six chances to guess a word. And I always start with the same word. And today I was like, I'm bored with that word. I'm going to use a different word. And my word was the Wordle word. If I would have used it, I would have got it in one guess.
And that would have, in Wordle words, that would have been phenomenal.
Yes. So people that play Wordle will know my angst that I did not use my regular word.
It's like mastermind
It's
with
so
words.
fun. It takes like 5 minutes.
Makes me want to ask, what the Wordle?
Some guy developed it for his girlfriend because she loves word games.
Okay.
And,
My wife loves word games.
And it's really
know who
fun
you are.
and easy. So you should try it.
Nice.
And I believe it was created by a student at the University of Oregon. And they've since sold their rights to like New York Times.
Yeah, New York Times.
It was a popular kind of paper and pencil game on our bus ride to Mexico.
Really?
It's just very easy format. Yeah,
Okay.
you have a word in your head, and somebody writes a 5-letter word down, and you let them know what words are correct and in the right spot, correct in the wrong
What
spot.
letters are correct.
Yeah, what letters. And you just go for it. So,
Huh?
am I allowed to know what your word was, or do you want to anonymity just in case somebody...
No, it was field. So
Field.
people that played today didn't
Field.
know field. That's what I usually put in first, and I didn't today.
Field of
And I
Grace.
regret it for the rest of my life.
And there's one puzzle a day, so it's not like you can play for an hour.
Oh,
You
I
can only-
heard there are apps that you can do, but I'm not checking into
Right.
those. I just like the ones a
Absolutely.
day.
We have a
Those
Wordle
ones a
purist
day.
over here.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
All right. Well, speaking of Wordle, it's something that you can do in silence and solitude.
Good
which
segue, Tim.
normally they're not that smooth. Which that is our spiritual discipline that we're going to talk about today. And I'm really excited to have you three. I have you two often on our spiritual discipline podcast because you guys are part of the team, the brain trust that has really led our team through this. And Michael, it was on my heart to get you on here, so I'm excited. And I'm just gonna throw it out to you guys, ladies, if you want to kick us off. Why this discipline?
Well, okay, I think Silence and Solitude is the most freeing of all the disciplines. Yeah, I think the bottom line is this. When we go through our day-to-day life, our routines, we're in the noise of culture and our lives, a lot of people in our lives, and that's not bad, but we get locked into these day-to-day rhythms. And when we do Silence and Solitude, it is a chance to pull away from all those things and just realign and center ourselves on the Lord. And so I just think it's so important. This idea of just quieting ourselves, coming back to center, realigning ourselves to the Lord. I think it's very, very scary and uncomfortable at first to get away and be in the silence and be alone with God. But it's on the other side of that, it's incredibly freeing for a lot of reasons. So
before I get to the couch, I totally agree with you, everything you said. But I want to kind of unpack, like, why in your words would you say it's scary? Because I totally agree with you. But what do you what do you think about that idea of being in silence and solitude is scary?
Well, you have to be you have to face yourself. You have to face what's the stuff you've been stuffing down all week and the realities that you don't want to think about. I know I'm not saying that's for everyone, and that's not to shame anyone, but we run fast and move through life fast sometimes because I think slowing down, especially being in the silence actually is deafening sometimes. Like, when you're listening to really loud music and then you press pause and that is loud. Like the experience of like silence is deafening sometimes because it just, especially like you're driving really fast and you slam on your brakes and you stop. That also is disorienting, And so I think it's just jolting in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. What about the couch? Why this discipline?
Well, I feel the same way as Natalie, just it's way less eloquent. Because for me, like when I'm alone and quiet, I realize what a train wreck I am and how messy everything is.
Yeah.
And how hard it is for me to focus, how hard it is for me to focus on the Lord. And it shows me how much I need to practice and how much room there is for growth. And I have time to really think about this situation and why did I react this way, and this situation and why did I feel that way. And I think as we're encountering more and more distractions that are so easy to, playing Wordle or whatever, it's so easy to stay distracted and not examine our reactions and our emotions. And a lot of our lives we're just reacting, we're not being intentional. And so it just kind of helps us examine our lives and our attitudes and our relationship with the Lord, and then lay it all down, talk it all through with Him, and maybe get a different perspective. And sometimes it's just a game plan to live differently. So for me, it's been really important as well. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, as I'm listening to you guys talk, I'm remembering a song lyric that I was working on a song with a friend of mine named Brandon years ago, and the lyric was, "When the noise of life is loud, and your voice is being drowned out." And I just think that's on the daily. Life is loud. We're just constantly used to noise. And I wish if I'd have thought of this, I'd Googled it, but I'm curious about all the white noise machines people can buy and all the apps that you can just play white noise. There's so many people that cannot even sleep without noise. So there's something really wild that's going on. We're used to so much stimulus and so much content, click, beep, notification. We don't do well when all of that is off. So when we use the term spiritual practice or spiritual discipline, I think that is 100% accurate, that this is something that we should give ourselves grace as we learn and grow in this, because it can be jolting, it can be scary, it can be uncomfortable at best, or maybe at times just confusing. What do I do? What would I do if I sat quietly before the Lord? I know that sometimes when we challenge people to pray in an extended manner, that freaks them out. Like, what would I do? I could never imagine myself praying for an hour. What may be worse is trying to sit quiet for an hour. What in the world would I do? And yet, that's an area that I think we need to press forward into, And people might realize how, it's like your soul is so hungry, your soul is thirsty, and you're denying it what it needs to be satisfied, and you're just taking substitutes. The substitutes keep you going. It's like never going to sleep and just drinking more Red Bulls.
That's a really good.
Jeez.
It's like, no, you need to stop. But when you stop drinking the Red Bull, it's going to freak your body out. But eventually you will rest, and you will not even understand how good you feel.
Because you'll either rest or you'll crash. Like
Right.
If
Yeah,
you're,
your body can't sustain it. And I think
Yeah.
that's the point. And that's why new apps, and even like how many people have to have, and not dissing on anybody, we all have our own journeys, and we do what we do to survive. But the amount of medication just to help people take a nap or help people sleep at night. And my heart hurts for that situation for a lot of really real reasons, journeys, things that have happened. It's like, my heart breaks for someone that's like, and I know you probably listen, and I hurt for you. Such a busy mind, such a tortured heart at times, that's like, I just need something to knock me out. I can't rest.
Yeah.
So it shows how desperately our culture needs it.
And I do think there's like if it was a graph that's scary, or that how hard it is to realize it, that goes up the longer and longer you ignore this practice. If it's something you're doing daily in a small manner or weekly, you're able to kind of face those. But if you have not done this for years or ever, it's more and more scary because of everything that you'll have to unpack. But
Yeah, I would say for me, I have a really active mind and am always thinking and always like have a hard time slowing down. And I've tried to do more silence and solitude in the last few seasons. And when I get alone, I start to realize like the things that have really been bothering me that I didn't know were bothering me. Conversations in the week that really hurt my feelings, and I didn't know they really hurt my feelings. Interactions, things I did that made me feel heavy, and it was maybe sin, but I wasn't awake to it till I got away with God. And so I think there's it's freeing because we stop living in autopilot and running, and we start to actually be present with the things that have weighed our souls down. There's a French mathematician, Blaise Pascal, and he had this famous quote where he said, all of humanity's problems stem from their inability to sit alone in a room quiet. Or he said, all of humanity's problems can stem back from the lack of a man being able to sit in a room quietly. Anyways, I just said that twice. But yeah, and it's just this idea that I think we would generally be healthier, happier, and more fulfilled people if we processed the week, processed the month, processed things bothering us. Yeah.
Well, and I think there's something, I mean, how many times does the Bible tell us to be still and know that he is God? Like, I think there's something about quieting ourselves and being still that reminds us that God's in charge and we get to trust him. And sometimes we don't remember that until we're in those silent and still places.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Psalm 46. I think if I'm remembering it right, Psalm 46, where it says, be still and know that I am God, that's a pretty active psalm. And I think there's a lot of battle that's going on around those verses. And I think it's interesting because a lot of times people say, well, that's nice. That's nice that you can afford to be still. And that's nice that your life is set up to where you can stop. But my life's just too crazy. And it's like, no, that scripture is written in the midst of, like, the point of why you need to be still is because things are so wild around you and it's getting so out of control.
Yeah.
Well, just like Jesus taking time to go off and be alone with the Father. I mean, nobody had more important, urgent work than he did.
Right. Well, and that's a question I always like to ask with these disciplines is what did it look like in Jesus' life? And we see it as like almost a top priority that he constantly kind of removes himself. And we can get back to that later if there's more you guys wanted to talk about. But now, as I'm kind of thinking through the disciplines, and I could be wrong because I'm only kind of thinking of a few, would you say this is one of the more countercultural disciplines to today's world, as in like the way we're talking about how much we need this, the world in general would like disagree? Like, I don't think the world accommodates this discipline very well. Would you guys agree?
No, this is definitely countercultural. Yep.
Right.
For
It's
sure.
hard to even find a place to be quiet.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, really, I think we mentioned this in a previous podcast, but the idea, I read a stat one time about how those that go out and record nature and make nature films, like how decades ago, how much easier it was for them to go out in the middle of the woods and just record nature sounds. But now it's virtually impossible because of planes flying overhead, all kinds of just the noise of technology and life. So it's getting harder and harder just to find quiet space, to be still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of that idea like, I think the world kind of says, you want to be better, do more, and these disciplines just literally say the opposite. And it's really hard. Like, this is, and we're going to kind of get into how it's impacted our lives. This has been a tough one for me, but it's this idea of like, wow, doing less, being with Jesus more. It's not about being better, but you get to experience the presence of Jesus. And like you said, you experience that freedom. And it's scary because when you start doing this, you realize the restriction, I think, that busy reactive lifestyle really held us down. So
Well, when you think about before there were TVs or maybe before radios or before the little record player thingies, I don't know. But anyway, people would just sit out on their front porch probably in the evenings and have
Talk to
quiet
people.
times.
Yeah.
But in the last 150 years, we went from having times when we were walking to somewhere quietly or, just the opportunities for natural silence and solitude have diminished incredibly. So I think that there's even more of a need to create a space where we do this.
Tawny, last night it was so crazy. So we have a bunch of guests from a couple different nations right now. So it's pretty fun. So they're all
like a
excited.
US embassy.
It is kind of like a U.S. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So they're all excited to be here specifically for the American 4th of July celebration.
Oh, nice.
So we get together. I don't know. There's like 20 of us, and it's loud. And I'm going, social butterfly. I'm going from group to group, hanging out. And I found myself like it started changing the dynamics when it started raining yesterday and pouring. So then now people are coming in instead of, playing outside or doing different games or tossing the football around. It was really fun. Now everybody's inside and one group is watching something on Netflix, another group's doing something, but it's still loud. And I just found there's a part of me that was just like, I got to get out of here. So I went in the front porch and I just sat and I just listened to it rain. And as I sat and I listened to it rain, now I'm hearing more than the rain. Now I'm hearing the sound that it makes in the gutter as it's dropping down. And as I just sat there and I just kind of breathed deep, it was just what I needed. It was beautiful. And our life doesn't afford a lot of those moments. So yeah, culturally, we stay in the busy and in the loud, and I think we need to force out of culture sometimes and listen to the rain.
That's good. I was just going to say, I was reading an article in Time magazine about how boredom is actually good for you. And it certainly sometimes boredom can lead to not, good things. But like, I guess your brain, when you're bored, starts to be able to, it leads into some creativity and problem solving, and your brain can like jump into certain modes when you're bored, like open itself up to just imagination and creative ideas and all of that. And we just refuse to be bored anymore, like that's embarrassing to say you're bored, like who wants to say I was bored today? You couldn't more easily say that you have a lame life, if you say you're bored, but it's not bad, so.
I remember when I worked at the Boys and Girls Club, I'd be doing an activity with kids. They're actively doing it. They're just like, I'm bored. I'm like, you're actively doing something. Like, you're doing the opposite of what I would call being bored. But it was just this like, this constant desire to just keep doing something else, kind of to what you were saying. So,
can I ask you a question, Tim?
No.
Okay. So, regarding Silence and Solitude, what would you say is hard for you about sitting, like just you sitting in a room alone doing nothing? What would that bring up for you?
Yeah, so I would be, and this is not scripted, it's just been something that's been on my heart lately, so I have a pretty quick answer, I think. I think over the last few years, I've been combating that whole idea that activity equals productivity, like just doing stuff to make yourself feel productive. So the idea of sitting there, there's this temptation to feel like you are inefficient and that you can, being a doer. And so the idea of sitting and being still feels like you are not doing what you were supposed to. And obviously that's a lie. So to sit and be quiet, and probably a natural conditioning just to just do something else. I can sit and be quiet with my phone out, or I can sit and be quiet with a movie on in the background. And before you know it, you're kind of doing 3 or 4 things while you're sitting and being still, which means you're not sitting and being still.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question. There's just all these no, and it's a very, very intentional, active, disciplined thing to tell yourself, chill out. Yeah.
I think if somebody's just starting to practice this, it's good to go somewhere else. Especially if you can go down to the river or go to a park or go somewhere that's not your natural habitat, because you naturally start thinking about the laundry or the dishes or, you know, whatever, if you're in your house. So I think that's a good way to start sometimes.
Yeah, you see this shift even in media. 50 years ago, in a magazine, you'd see an advertisement of someone portrayed as successful, and they would be doing leisure activities. They would be resting. And that would be prized, that you're successful if you get to a place where you can stop. Now advertisements show you are successful if you are busy. So you'll see the advertisement of some attorney working a 20-hour day, and, you know, that's success. And so we're hurting ourselves by believing the wrong things, thinking that product, like, I totally can relate to that. I've had similar struggles, and I'm trying to, with my wife's help, I'm so thankful for her, that encouragement, that I actually can get more done and be more effective when I have rhythms of rest and rhythms of pause, and especially challenged to sit quiet before the Lord and listen.
Yeah. Because when you're in that whole reactive state, you're operating out of like a 10% capacity. But then when you let yourself rest, you could be like a lot higher. Do you guys think that and again, this is kind of a weird question, but I think you guys know where I'm going. Do you think you can have a healthy Christian walk by not practice this discipline? Like, do you think there is health in that go, or not prioritizing silence and solitude? Or would you say that this is a discipline that is vital to a healthy Christian walk? And there might need to be some follow-up questions with that, but...
I don't know. I mean, I think when we look at, you know, Christian martyrs, many of our church fathers, people practice their faith differently. And I'm kind of at a point where I don't think I could look at someone and say, you're not a healthy Christian, or you are. I mean, surely there's patterns we can pick up on.
Of course.
You know, there's like Mother Teresa, who probably never took a day off, you know, and then there's the church fathers who were just out in the desert doing silence and solitude. And hello, what about evangelism? Like, and so it's a little hard. I would say it's hard to be healthy if you never self-reflect. Yeah. Were you going to say something, Tawny? I know.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say you can't be healthy without it, but I would say probably everybody's healthier with it.
Yeah.
You know.
You can
Good
operate out of
word.
a better version of yourself, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, because I know for me, the difference between when I've had a couple weeks where I have not got to be alone, not had any silence, not had any solitude, and the difference when I get to practice it regularly is pretty astounding in just my emotional, mental, spiritual health. So, yeah, like Nat always says, I wouldn't want to shame anybody about it, but I know for me, I'm definitely healthier with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to put it. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, as we are getting ready to take our church through it, I'd want to know, like, what are you guys most excited about, maybe regarding our church going through this, or even about the discipline? What are you excited about if we haven't talked about it? And then, yeah, I think we have touched on what are the hindrances or the barriers, but what are some barriers we could expect some of our congregation to face as we go through this discipline?
Yeah, I'd love also if we could take some time to talk about how to do it. Like what are like, how, because a lot of people do it and they don't, like, I know for me when I first started practicing, I'm like, what do I do? Like, do I just sit and close my eyes? Like, so if we could take a little time talking about that too, that'd be great.
We'll do that next for sure.
But what were the first two questions? Sorry.
What are you most excited about taking our church through?
Oh, the spiritual discipline?
Yeah, this one specifically. Like, which application, maybe?
Okay. Oh, okay.
I'll go, Nat.
Okay, good.
You're like, oh, me? You want me to say something? So, I'm the worship guy. A lot of people think, see me in that, lead worship. So obviously, I love watching for opportunities for us to grow, for me to grow, for our church family to grow in depth of worship. Legendary worship leader, songwriter Matt Redman wrote a song lyric years ago that I love, where he says, "Worship starts with seeing you. Worship starts with seeing you. Our hearts respond to your revelation." And I would say, yes. And worship starts with hearing him, seeing him, because it's hard to worship that which you don't know. It's hard to love that which you don't know. It's hard to trust the one you don't know. And this spiritual discipline gives an opportunity to start down that path, because the more we try and quiet our hearts and listen and hear, start realizing, wow, God has a lot to say. I very rarely stop to listen. And people struggle today going, man, does God speak anymore? Does God have anything to say to me? And I would say in my life, the problem has never been that God's not speaking. The problem has been I very rarely stop and listen. So I think our church family has an incredible opportunity to grow in depth of their walk with the Lord, because they finally can go down the path of going, hey, what would a two-way conversation look like? You know, you imagine that with close people in your life, if it was always a one-way conversation, how wonky your relationship would be. This is an opportunity to practice saying, what do you have to say, Lord?
Well, and I was thinking while you were talking to Michael that we maybe should have done this one before we did practicing the presence of God, because I think this one is kind of a foundation for that. Because it's like you were saying, once we get to know the Lord better, we can recognize him better when we're busy.
Yes.
But sometimes we have to be still and quiet to hear his voice and to sense his presence. And the more we practice that, the more we're able to recognize him in our busy times as well. And anything that helps us grow in our awareness of God's presence and his love and his power and him working in our lives is exciting, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a hymn, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing," that there's a lyric that says, you know, tune my heart to sing thy praise. I think it's like we need to tune our ears. You know, we need to listen and learn. And I don't know about you guys, but like I can sit in my house, and we have hardwood floors in this one area, and I've now learned the sound of different family members. I've even learned the sound of the dogs. I can tell just by the trot which dog's about to come around the corner, and it puts a big smile on my face. Like I know the sound, you know, each of my family members make, and I'm smiling, I'm looking, and just by the sound.
Nice.
So it's like, and I think back to the Garden of Eden, and somehow, you know, Adam and Eve walking through the garden with the Lord in the cool of the day, and they would have known you'd have known the Lord's footsteps. How cool is that? Like they would have known, they wouldn't have had all this noise. They would have recognized the Lord coming around the corner, say, let's walk. So this is an opportunity we're giving to people.
Definitely. Well, I want to talk about the how, but even specifically, like very practical things that like you guys have found work in your life, or things that have really impacted your life. So like regarding this spiritual discipline, what applications have you guys kind of applied to your life?
Well, Dallas Willard, famously said that when you do, Sabbath or silence and solitude or retreat, he said three things happen. First, you realize the earth is brimming with goodness. So we live in a beautiful earth, and it's just hard to see that, So that's one thing. Secondly, you realize you have a soul. That's what he said happens. And then thirdly, you realize people aren't as bad as you think they are. That's the third thing that happens. And so I think for me, there's just a lot of joy when I stop doing the autopilot thing and I'm actually just present with life, and I'm living, like what Tawny said, proactively instead of reactively. And so I think there's a lot of joy in that. And we think doing life quickly and fast and hurried is where the joy is for some reason. But the joy is actually when we're slowing down and we're just being present, you know. So that's what it's been for me.
Okay.
So
for me, practically, like I plan an amount of time that I want to be alone with the Lord, and to decide where I want to go, if I want to stay home, if I want to be inside or outside, or where I want to be, and then I'm really careful what I take with me. Like if I'm going to go out in my backyard, I leave my phone in my bedroom, and I just bring my Bible and my journal and whatever, spiritual books I want to bring. And I just go, and I don't require myself to read, or the only requirement that I have is to be with the Lord. And sometimes it's just sitting completely quietly. Sometimes I pray. Sometimes I pray and listen. And sometimes I just listen. And then sometimes I read. Sometimes I journal. But I just, for me, if I'm really careful not to bring anything that can distract me, and then if my mind gets wandering off about something that's not important at all at this moment, then I don't feel guilty or ashamed. I just rein it back in and be like, okay, Lord, help me focus, because apparently it's going to be a hard day to focus. And I just spend the time with him. But I always am thankful that I did. Even if I didn't feel like he spoke to me, like you said, Nat, even sometimes just being outside or sometimes just being quiet, I still feel refreshed. I still am thankful for the quiet and the time with him. And then sometimes I have some life-changing revelation about something, and it's amazing or convicting, but it's always very valuable regardless.
That's helpful just to know how you spend that time. So,
Yeah, I try and I schedule time each week outside of my prayer and Bible reading to just. I have some places in the area that I can go hide that are pretty close, so I can get there fast. And those moments are more like half hour where I'm just trying to decompress and turn off everything and just sit and be still. And my goal for that time is just stillness. I'm not looking for the mountains to shake. I'm not looking for writing on the wall.
That's a bonus, though.
Yeah, that is a bonus. Not Cascadia, but smaller mountains.
oh my gosh.
But then recently I spent some time, it was about 3 hours or a little bit more, and I had a different expectation for that, but it was a time to, like you said, I went down somewhere around the river around here, and all I took with me was a journal and a pencil, and I just let myself, it takes time. It's almost like you can't be frustrated.
Right.
You got to remember that they call it spiritual discipline because it takes discipline. And if you start feeling weird in 20 minutes and go, this is weird, this doesn't work for me, it's like someone trying to get on a new exercise routine or anything you're trying to do something new. Expect it to not necessarily feel perfect or go perfect the first time. But what I found is in that instance, it took almost an hour to quiet myself down, and I just sat and I watched. And you talked about how silence is deafening. At first, it was like everything was loud, and then by the time I was done, it was so crazy because it's like I was listening to the water, and at first it's like, well, it's just water, and then it's like I could start hearing like, well, no, this is the ripple right here, that other sound that's right around the corner, and at first it's like, oh wow, I'm hearing the song of a bird, and it's like, now I hear another song, now I hear another. Wow, there's like 5 birds, and I can recognize each song. And I got to the spot where it got, in some ways, the loudness, it's fun. It's like crazy how it goes from quiet to loud. It's like the sound of my pencil on the paper. Like I could hear the sound of my pencil writing. And in that moment, it was so profound for me because I was realizing like, wow, Lord, your creation is loud. Like you are speaking. So many things are going on. And it's been happening all day long. I just didn't stop and tune my ears to listen. And then out of that, I just journaled. So I think that's one thing people can do is you can journal, but even just learning to listen, like it'll help you even just with friends, learning to listen, pay attention.
Well, and I think too, there's different benefits and obstacles in different amounts of time. Because even sitting and being quiet for 5 minutes, like, I don't know how long you were out on your porch last night, but can be beneficial. But sometimes, like you said, it takes an hour just to quiet your mind. So, if you've never done this before, try different amounts of time, whether it's 5 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour, or take a whole, I think one of our challenges is I think we just said a chunk of time.
Yeah.
Like a morning or an afternoon, but like go somewhere for like 4 hours and just see what happens. Because each amount of time is different. And each time you go be alone with the Lord is a different experience. And sometimes they feel kind of horrible, but don't give up. Just do it again.
It's totally just like I think we correlated it to like working out. Like, Nat's a runner. I don't run. If I decided, Nat, give me your running routine right now, and I try and do that, I'm gonna be cooked in like a day or two. Could I build up to that? Sure, but if I try and run what Nat runs tonight, it's not going to go well. But if you just do a little bit and a little bit of this, and then when you're like, oh no, I've had enough. I know for me, this discipline is like so necessary for my life and so absent for so long. And it was just one of those like so conditioned that you don't even realize, like living in that reactive autopilot. And I remember Rach would be like, so I would sometimes, especially during COVID when maybe your workspace was your house and their workspace was their house, I would be working on my laptop with like, and I needed a movie on in the background. And it was always some sort of like a movie I've seen before, natural disaster, action, but like those are my jam. But I'm like kind of realizing it, like there's this like kind of high energy movie going on in the background, but I didn't even realize it until, and you look back in hindsight where it's like, oh, it's like a really intense movie. A, it's just distracting because you like certain parts of the movie, but it's kind of creating this anxiety you don't realize because it's something else going on, and there's like an anxiety like anxious part in the movie, and then all of a sudden it's like so I'm doing these things before I realize it. And so I recently I went out, and I think that my big thing that I can encourage people is allow yourself just no agenda whatsoever. I took a day off of work last month, and I just had all day. I dropped Claire off at 8, had to go pick her up at 3. I had nothing planned that day, and I was driving to go somewhere, and I saw Table Rock, and I was like, I want to go there. So then I just went, and I had nothing. I didn't have to tell anybody I was going there. Probably would have been smart in case something bad happened, but I didn't, and I just went somewhere. And I had a book, and I had a paper and pen, but I didn't have any goals. I was just going to go up, and it was huge. I ended up reading a book that I'm guessing we're going to reference in our resources, and it was just one of those like kick to the face, like telling you everything you need to know and highlighting all the stuff we've talked about. But there was no agenda. I was just going, and then I was being, and kind of like letting your brain, like giving yourself time for your brain to decompress.
That's huge.
As you guys know, like our staff every weekly meeting, we take some time to pray. And I rarely will pray out loud because I use that time for like my brain just to literally like just decompress and unpack and hear the prayers being prayed over us from the team. But it's just like, if you have never done it before, you just need to go do a brain dump essentially and just unpack. Like I described my brain as like walking into a room that was so dirty, but you didn't know where to start cleaning, right? And like these Silence and Solitudes, I think it allows you to like, maybe you just clean the one corner, maybe you take the dresser, maybe you make the bed, and that's it. And so that's
maybe it's just saying, Lord, this place is a mess, right. And hearing
you
him
do
say,
it,
it's
right.
okay. Nothing's impossible with me.
Right. That's step one. That's where a lot of us aren't, right? Is this room is a mess because we're so jacked on Red Bull in a 25-hour day that we have stopped to even realize the room's a mess.
Yeah, I think as we become more present with ourselves, we start to know what our bodies need. So I think a lot of freedom. Some days you might just need to go on a nature walk. Some days you might have something you just really need to pray about with God, and you go do that. Some days you might just want to sit by the river. I think there's a lot of freedom in this, and you start to know what you need. I think some days you might go with a friend. I mean, maybe you two aren't saying anything to each other, or a spouse. Maybe you're not saying anything to each other. You're just sitting.
Be careful, though. My friends will not be quiet.
I know.
tried to take a couple friends on me with my little
bring the right
retreats.
friend.
Like, you guys are still talking. We're supposed to be quiet.
Right. You have to pick the right friends. Yes. But I think there's a lot of fun and creativity in Silence and Solitude. Like, just go do what you feel like your body needs, what the Lord is calling you to do, and it's there's a lot of fun with it, I think.
I think too, just as far as practical tips, you don't have to reinvent the wheel always. Mm-hmm. You just maybe do your normal routine different. Like, for example, I love music. I love to listen to music. And I also like to walk. It's easy to always have music on. Mm-hmm. So what I found sometimes is I'm going to go for a walk, and I'm not going to plug my ears and play something else. I'm just going to walk, and I'm going to listen. Again, it's learning a new skill. I'm just going to listen. The sounds of my neighborhood, sounds of my feet on the pavement. It's good. Or I'm going to take this drive, and sometimes I feel the nudging of the Lord. I'm about to turn some music on, and I just hear the Lord be like, listen, just listen. And you might go, it's a drive, it's a commute. How can that be sacred or holy? It's like, well, God's when God's in the house, when his presence is with you, you know, it's like anything can become sacred and holy. It's like, just try taking some of what you normally do and consecrate it, like devote it to listening to the Lord and just sitting, you know, being still, quiet before him. It's cool.
That's good.
I totally want to reemphasize what Nat said. There's so much creativity and freedom, right? This isn't like you better do this, you better do this. Would you guys say though, like, would it be fair to say that one, like, across the board hint is you probably want to have as little technology with you as possible? Or would you guys argue, no, like, technology, your phone, a laptop, but like it could still be a part of this? Or would you advocate for, like, that would be a good step one, take technology away?
If you're the one person in the world that can have your technology with you and not get distracted, maybe. But I don't know. I think there's something with our brains, and I'm sure they've done studies on this, or they will, but I think there's something about just not having technology that helps us heal, because we have it so much, just our brains and our souls and our spirits to just be with natural things. I don't know. I just feel like
Such a good point.
Well, I for years said technology doesn't distract me when I just was operating in a distracted mindset.
but
So
it's
if-
because you had so much going,
right,
you didn't
so
know.
I think my argument, I would be very like, except for getting in your car and going on a drive, I think that's an exception. But I think it would beg the question, like, can we survive without technology? I would be very comfortable saying, like, you should really try and not have any sort of technology around you when entering into this practice, except for your vehicle to take you places. But
Yeah.
but
It's
again,
just it's the heart, you know. It's like, what are you doing it for? Are you, you know, I mean, my laptop is not coming on Table Rock with me. You know what I mean? And so, like, some of us, if technology's around, I'm gonna want to be on it, you know. But some people might not be the same way. So I guess
That's true.
it's just the spirit of it, you know.
Well, like if I'm gonna go down in the river, I'll bring my phone, but I'll leave it in my car.
Right.
Or you know, if I were to keep it with me I would put it on airplane mode or something. You know, just because I wouldn't want the temptation of seeing that I have a text and wanting to see who it is, because I'm too curious, and then you know.
I have to understand some people might have better self-control with their phones than I do. So
Sure.
I would just
Yeah.
be speaking to the people that are on the same level as me, where if your phone's in your pocket, you're going to grab it 4 times just because. But
Well, and then a lot of times how we use technology is to manage what could be alone time. So then we're not alone. I was listening to a podcast recently. A guy was just talking about how, you know, we have an epidemic addiction problem with social media and our phones, because they say science is starting to show that when the notifications go off, whether it's a text or an email, or it's like on whatever social of your choice, it triggers endorphin release, and it can become an addiction for a lot of people, and they're just looking for that next hit, that next interaction. So, I mean, is technology the enemy? No. But do we want to develop ways to live life without it? Yeah. And especially if you want to listen, you have to silence other voices so you can hear the most important voice.
So true.
all good stuff. Before we get to what I find a very important part of this, the resources, the keep digging, I want to kind of get any final thoughts or things you guys wanted to bring up that maybe you didn't about this discipline.
Do it.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Just do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and kind of reemphasizing, like, this is going to be really hard for a lot of people. It was like, it took me, I think you said it takes time. It took me, I sat in a season where I was identifying that my busyness and my attraction to noise was a problem. I spent a long time just sitting in that and like identifying it, and it took me a while to actually finally like do something about it. So yeah, it's a long process.
Yeah, I'd say just observe yourself. Observe when you're turning things on, just to have something in your ears. Observe when you're turning on something to manage your anxiety, you know. That's certainly something that comes into play for me. And so, yeah, just observe. Maybe that's how you start, just observing when you need the noise and why do you need it. I think that's really important. So my sister actually, she's said, back to what you said, Michael, about listening to just the water, the birds, or the rain. A technique actually for managing anxiety is actually being present with creation around you, and being in the wilderness and just trying to listen. What are all the different like sounds I can hear? And it's actually very healing in a lot of ways. So anyways, yeah.
Well, what books, podcast, resources, other do you guys have for our listeners to steer them towards?
Well, hands down, I know it's a book you read, Tim, but the book that just opened this up for me was Silence and Solitude by Ruth Haley Barton. It was transformative for me. She just fully unpacks everything and then gives practices at the end. So I highly recommend it.
I was reading that book and it was like I had to pause and be like, is this lady watching me right now? Because like it just, I don't know if I've had a book speak right to where I was in the exact, and she talked about stuff that we weren't able to, like being dangerously busy and stuff like that, and just related to it so much as just like, yeah, that was a phenomenal book. I give it a ×2 as far as encouraging it.
Yeah, I can't actually remember when I started this practice. And I'm sorry, Tim, I don't think I even have any resources about it. The thing about Silence and Solitude is, you can't really do a podcast about Silence and Solitude because you just got to go. You just got to go do it. So,
Right.
yeah, I can't think of anything.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've mentioned it before. Richard Foster's Celebration of the Discipline, it touches on it. It's epic. The Reservoir, it's a 15-month weekday. It deals with other areas of spiritual formation, but it's really, really, really good. It's a good challenge. Soul Feast by Marjorie Thompson, super, super good. I agree with Tawny, though. It's like you take in input, you listen, you read, and then you just got to go apply and expect it to sometimes feel, sometimes feel odd. Like sometimes everyone wants it to be like, oh my gosh, I just had this magical experience first time out. Might not be that way because it's super countercultural, and your body has habits. You're used to doing certain things, and trying to do something new, it can sometimes feel awkward.
Yeah.
But so worth it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So my final encouragement, if this is something that has spoke to you, when you look at your calendar and you have one of those slots that has nothing in it, try to keep it that way for as long as possible and just use some of that time to sit. And it's not wrong. I think that's what I needed to be told. Just sitting there and being in the presence is not wrong. It's not bad. It's actually going to be more beneficial for you than taking a Red Bull, watching a movie on your phone, listening to a podcast all at the same time. So, All right. Well, thank you guys very much. I feel like that hour went by really quickly in the presence of good company. Any final words? I know I've asked that, but I want to run it back one more time.
I would just say this final quote that I love. Oswald Chambers, he says, solitude with God repairs the damage done by the fret, noise, and clamor of the world. And I think that says it really well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I just want to reiterate, like, it's not bad to watch movies. It's not bad to listen to music.
Right.
Like, these are all, like, those are great things, It's just being present with ourselves and with God and how important that is, And so no shame with any of those things. So,
I know. I watch movies all the time, but I think when it has completely replaced or has removed any sound solitude. Yeah, like we just got to understand what it's like to be there with ourselves, like you guys were saying. So, All right. Well, this will not be the last time that you guys will be on this podcast. Listeners, thank you so much for sticking around with us, and we will catch you next week.